What's up, guys? 2-0 day yesterday. 6-1 run over the last couple of days. Good weekend. Pretty solid. UAB, nice, easy, no sweat win in the conference. What is it? The American Athletic Conference final there. Beating Temple. Temple, not very good. As I mentioned in the handicap for that, UAB, easy win there. San Antonio Spurs got there, although it was a little bit questionable. The game was pretty close most of the way, but then San Antonio was actually down 10 late in the game, and I was just like, this is going to be a loss. This is awful. A lot of it was points off of turnovers, even though the turnover margin wasn't really a huge differential there between the two teams, but it was just the timeliness of the turnovers was not in San Antonio's favor at all, and they were losing in the points off of turnovers battle badly. They were down 10, and I actually stopped paying attention to it because I was like, this is going to be a loss. Then I looked a little while later, and it's tied, and it's about to go into overtime. And I think San Antonio actually had a chance to win in regulation, too. Went into overtime. They had a nice overtime period and won. I'll take it. It's a win. I don't think the handicap was wrong, although they did get outplayed in some aspects of the game. Not entirely by any means, but it was a close call. Move on to today. Of course, this is the lull, the calm before the storm here with March Madness, the first 4 games in Dayton starting tomorrow. This is March Madness Monday, I guess we'll call it, where it's like the one day where there's no college basketball and there's a very small slate. I do have one play in the NBA I'll get to. Skipping the NHL card, which is only 2 games in the NHL. Not interesting, really, to me. Don't really see any interesting angles there. NBA, it's kind of tough to find an angle that I like as well. March Madness, of course, the brackets came out yesterday, Selection Sunday. I forgot to mention the rest of the tournament auto bid clinchers that happened the prior day, the Saturday. There were way more than I remembered. Of course, the SWAC and the MEAC, which are conferences that I just kind of ignore the existence of. Of course, those teams are both playing in the first 4 in Dayton, as usual. Congratulations to them. They get a spotlight game. Grambling won the SWAC, and they were the 1 seed, although I don't think they were actually the best team in the SWAC, but they were probably one of the top 3 or 4 teams power rating-wise in that conference. And then the MEAC was Howard, who I think probably was like the 3rd best team power rating-wise in that conference. I don't really know. Congratulations to those teams, obviously. The MAAC finished that day as well with St. Peter's. Oh, God, we remember St. Peter's making that Elite 8 run as a 15 seed a couple years ago. I just thought it would be hilarious if St. Peter's wound up as a 16 seed in the tournament and the committee put them up against Purdue, one of the teams they knocked out of the tournament a couple years ago. Of course, this St. Peter's team doesn't have some of the best players that run that St. Peter's team. There has been some turnover. St. Peter's not a very good team, a 5 seed in the MAAC, and they somehow got through it with a close win in that final. I think over Fairfield, who was the best power ratings wise team in the MAAC, and I kind of wanted to see Fairfield get in just because I think they haven't been in for who knows how long. But St. Peter's is in, the Peacocks. So people are just going to remember the name. That might even like overvalue St. Peter's a little bit in the tournament just because people remember the name and the run that they made as that 15 seed, upsetting Kentucky in ridiculous fashion and then upsetting Purdue as well in that tournament. What else? The MAC, not the MAAC, but the MAC. This game was ridiculous. I can't believe I forgot to mention this game. Akron, who was the best power rated team in the MAC, did wind up getting out of that tournament with the win. Had a really close final against Kent State, who was the 8th seed, who made a Cinderella run in that conference. And the way that game ended, Kent State scored with, I think, like a few seconds left in the game to take the lead back by 1. Apparently, one of their players, whichever player this was, didn't know what the score was, and he thought they were still losing by 1, I guess, or whatever, and he committed an intentional foul when they were up 1 with a few seconds left and gave Akron 2 free throws, and they made both of them and won by 1. That's just completely insane, man. That's embarrassing. One of the most embarrassing moments that you'll see this college basketball season. Congratulations to Akron, I guess. But, man, you got to feel kind of bad. Well, I don't know if you feel bad for that guy. I did see some videos of him, like, taunting Akron from last year or something. Or he put out videos on, like, TikTok or whatever, like, fuck Akron, whatever. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of karma there. And Akron, as far as the season that they had, they were the best team in that conference. So I guess you could say they deserve to get out of that conference and get into the tournament. And Conference USA, I completely forgot to mention as well. That tournament just got totally upended by UTEP having a couple upsets, and I don't even know. And then UTEP didn't go away in the conference final either, even though it looked like they were out of it. I think multiple times they did not go away, but Western Kentucky was still able to get out of that one with the win. So congratulations to Western Kentucky, probably I would say the third or fourth best team power rating wise in that conference. They get to the tournament. And is that it? I think those are the only ones I'm missing from Saturday. And then, of course, Sunday, we had the rest of the auto bid clinchers. As I mentioned, we had UAB. Congratulations to them winning the American. And they covered for me in that game against a Temple team that was just completely outmatched, that it just really overperformed throughout that entire tournament. And UAB, probably only like the fourth or fifth best team in that conference, but congratulations to them. They get through. They're somewhere on the 14 line or something. The Atlantic 10, unbelievable. That tournament got completely flipped on its head as well, with a bunch of the low seeds getting into the semifinals there. And Duquesne got out of the Atlantic 10, beating VCU in the final. Duquesne had a big lead going into halftime, and then they almost blew it. Had a terrible, terrible offensive performance in the second half. You watch Duquesne, that team looks totally inept, dude. If you watch the A10 final there at the end, they were doing everything they could to try to lose that game, just not being able to hold on to the ball and just not being able to score whatsoever. And that team is an 11 seed, and it seems like some people are actually picking them in that upset. I would not be doing that. I will tell you that. Against a BYU team that can score a lot. Duquesne's not even that good defensively, I don't think so. I don't see how Duquesne is not going to just be totally overwhelmed by the amount of scoring that BYU can do. This Duquesne offense looks like they can't score whatsoever. So I don't know about that. But congratulations to Duquesne. They beat VCU. They were able to hold them off at the end of that game when it got close. It looked like both teams really didn't even want it. They both couldn't score at the end. Duquesne, congratulations, because they haven't been into the tournament since like the 1940s, I think. Or is that what it was? Or no, 1970s, I guess it was 40-something years. Yeah, I think the 1970s was their last tournament appearance. So congratulations to them. They somehow got an 11 seed. I don't know how. Illinois won the Big Ten, of course. That was an entertaining game, a close game. That's always the last game that ends on Selection Sunday, like right before the selection. So although the committee, I think, pretty much already had it like locked in at that point. I think Illinois was already locked into a 3 seed at that point, regardless of that outcome. And Wisconsin was already locked into the 5. So I don't think the committee really had anything left to do at that point while that game was going on. Illinois able to get out of that one with a win, close game, entertaining game. And of course, Yale won the Ivy yesterday. And I think the earliest of the results in yesterday's games, Brown almost pulled off another upset in that one. Brown had like a 7-point lead in the final couple minutes, and just Brown, they are a horrendous free throw shooting team. They missed a lot of free throws at the end there, and Yale hit a couple of threes in the clutch there. Brown could have gotten that win there, and of course they wound up not being able to do so. Yale gets out of there with the 1-point win, and it came down to the absolute final possession where Yale won on a buzzer beater, if I remember correctly. And it was a play where they passed it. They had a guy wide open right under the basket, and Brown didn't even defend him at all, and he just put it in. And that was it. And it to me, it almost looked like there might have been like 0.1 left on the clock when that shot went in. But what can you do? They said that the time had expired. That was very close. But what are you going to do with 0.1 seconds left anyway if you're Brown? So unfortunate for Brown, I guess. Princeton, best team in the Ivy, is out because of all that, because they couldn't beat Brown. But you get Yale, probably the second best team power rating wise in that conference, gets in. I guess I forgot to mention the Mountain West winner the other day as well. So congratulations to New Mexico, who ran through that tournament. I think with like the first 2 wins, maybe that probably put them into like the first 4, I would have said, but they guaranteed their bid by just winning the conference anyway and just grabbing the auto bid from that conference. So I think at that point they were probably already going to get in anyway. So congratulations to New Mexico. And then of course, Auburn won the SEC yesterday. I had mentioned that as a lean yesterday. That was an easy win for them over Florida. Congratulations to Auburn. Very good team, very balanced team. Florida made a nice run. They'll be in the tournament. However, Florida, their big man, Hangloten, Hangglider. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. their big man, they're like 7-foot guy there in the middle. He had a really, really ugly looking injury yesterday, man, where he just came down wrong on his leg. And oh boy, that looked bad. I think he probably broke his leg in that one. He is not going to be playing for Florida, which is very unfortunate. So Florida's going to be down their big man, even though they do have good guards. They have a bunch of good other players. They have a pretty good team this year. So we'll see how far they can actually go, but probably not as far as maybe they would have been able to with him in there. So that's very unfortunate for Florida. It looked like a Joe Theismann type of injury almost. It wasn't quite that bad, but man, it did not look good at all. The way his leg came down, oh boy. And I think that covers it for all the auto bids, I guess, right? I think I went through all of them. I don't know if I'm going to do like a tournament bracket video or not, because I know everybody loves brackets. Everybody loves filling out their brackets and whatever. We'll see if I do or not, but I can tell you that people fill out their brackets in completely the wrong way, in like the opposite way that they should. Like, you need to game theory it. And yes, it does depend sort of on the size of your bracket pool, but either way, you still don't want to pick the teams that everybody else is picking to the extent that they're over picking it. And the way that people just typically fill out their brackets is, oh, I think this team's going to win this matchup, and then move them on. And then they'll look at that next matchup. Oh, I think this team's going to win this matchup. Huge problems with that, obviously, is that you're taking a team to go 3 rounds in or whatever. They might not even be there by then. So it's like you're talking about this hypothetical matchup that isn't even that likely to happen, which is totally stupid. You're talking about things in the clouds that won't even happen. So really the way to fill out a bracket is you have to do it counterintuitively, really, in the inverse way, which you wind up picking teams that you think might not even be the teams that you think are going to win, really, because what you want to do is, and ESPN got rid of their who picked whom, which I hate, because it was a grid where you could see the percentage of people picking every single team to advance to every single round. And that's very helpful because you can compare that to betting sites where they're like ESPN Bet and 5 Dimes. And some of these sites have odds for every single round of the tournament. And even DraftKings and FanDuel, I think, have the odds for most of the key like rounds in the tournament, like a team's odds to get there. But of course, if you're using the betting odds, you can't just directly translate them to percentage odds. You have to like factor in that the VIG is factored in, and then you have to look at the entire slate of odds. So it gets a little bit difficult to actually come up with a percentage that way, although I actually did it last year. And I mean, my bracket was okay last year, but I did have Houston winning the whole thing, so that hurt. But that being said, yeah, so I don't know what we're going to do here with ESPN not having the who picked whom, though, so you don't have the percentages of what people are actually picking, because that's really relevant information, because you want to find spots where you want to go against teams that are being overpicked based on what their actual odds are to advance at each level of the tournament, at each round, basically. And you want to find teams that are being undervalued by the pickers, or pickers aren't picking a team up to the level that they actually should be getting picked to go that far based on their odds to get that far. And other than using the betting sites, I mean, you can also use 538 does one. KenPom and Bart Torvik, I think, both put out one. I don't think they've done it yet, but they'll run the numbers. We'll probably see these things come out today or whatever, where they'll put those out, and you can see like the analytics. The guys that do all the analytics put out their actual like percentages, although those don't quite like, they're not going to quite factor in like the injuries like to Florida's big man and stuff, but they're pretty good as far as they'll give you the percentages, and you can use those to find spots where teams are being picked too frequently or not frequently enough. And you want to be on those teams that are not being picked frequently enough. And you want to start with the champion, because the champion is what matters the most in like the traditional bracket scoring. Each round is worth the same amount, but of course that final round, the entire round is getting the champion right, and that's worth as much as getting all the first round picks right, which of course nobody's going to do. But although it has happened before, but of course no perfect bracket has ever happened. That would be insane, almost impossible. But yeah, so you want to focus on the champion first. You actually want to do it in the reverse way. And ESPN does still have the percentages on who's picking who for the champion in their game there. So you can take a look at that and compare that to what the odds actually are. And you can see that there are teams that are being undervalued by the public. So obviously the public is going to be picking UConn too much based on what their odds are. I think their odds basically are putting them as probably about 20% to win the tournament, but people are picking them above that, like probably somewhere in the higher 20% range are picking UConn as their champion. So that means that UConn is an overpicked commodity there, an overvalued commodity. Like if you want to look at it like a fantasy, like like daily fantasy perspective or whatever, there are like too many players that own that team, and you want to own a different team at that level. So like it looks like the undervalued teams to win the championship are actually like Purdue seems pretty undervalued, and Houston does. So I can throw that out there as far as a couple of teams that look like they're pretty undervalued there. And that's what you want to do, but you want to find the odds at every single level, which you can, but then you want that who picked whom, man. I don't know if there's going to be a substitute for that or not on like one of the other sites or whatever, but that's valuable information because that tells you what the public thinks, and those are like, that's your competition basically that you need to beat. So you need to find value against what those people are doing, if that makes sense. So you start with the champion, and then you move your way back and you look at the other side of the bracket from where your champion pick is and say, who's the most undervalued team to get to the championship game from that side of the bracket, and pick that team. Then do it for the other two regions to get into the Final Four. Who's the most undervalued team to make the Final Four from those two remaining regions, and then go from there. And then usually when I get down to the first round, then I just kind of look at like the actual like game matchup, because you have the lines on all the games. You can see what the market is doing on all those games. So those you can just kind of pick the way that you normally would for the most part. So if that makes sense, I don't know, but I don't know if we'll do a video to show like an example of it or not, but I think there are a few other guys out there who put out videos where they do a similar thing. I think that's all the bracket talk I was going to do. Let's get to the actual play that I have in the NBA today before I get out of here. I'm going to do a zigzag, and that zigzag that I mentioned yesterday, the Pistons actually was a winner yesterday. They covered against the Heat. They lost and covered, I believe, but there's a similar zigzag spot here where I don't like the fact that I'm going to be on a public team here, but I'm going to fade the Minnesota T-Wolves, man. I think the way that this zigzag situation sets up, I think it almost sets this up as being like a sandwich spot. Because look at what Minnesota's not in a good spot here at all, dude. They're playing it's a zigzag because they're playing a second straight game in elevation in Utah. But look at their schedule, man. This is going to be their sixth straight road game. And that type of thing can add up, man. They're already 3-2 on the road trip. So, yeah, I mean, debatably, they don't want to wind up going 3-3 on the road trip. But even so, they've won 2 in a row, beating the Clippers. That's a huge win. And they had a few days off. So they were rested going into Utah, even though they were potentially in a letdown spot there. They went into Utah and were able to win again and cover. They won by 19 as like a 7.5-point favorite. And they're also 7.5-point favorites in this game. So I was hoping that maybe the line would move up a little bit and we'd get the real zigzag scenario there, just because the line might overreact to that most recent outcome, although the books kind of know that the zigzag is a thing at this point from NBA playoffs, from that being a situation that a lot of bettors are able to capitalize on for so long in the NBA playoffs. But still, I think when you're getting the same number that you got in that first game, and it's on an overvalued team in general, like Minnesota, this is a spot where, because Minnesota was able to win that game so easily, it's like, what do they have to adjust coming into this game when everything worked in the previous game? They have no adjustments to make, whereas the Utah Jazz, they have all the adjustments to make because they're the team that played poorly in that game, and they lost. And they've lost 4 of the last 5 games, but 3 of those losses were to Denver, Boston, and Minnesota. So it's like you can blame them for any of those losses. And maybe they were just looking ahead to Denver in that Chicago game that they didn't play well in, because you can't blame them for losing to 3 of the best teams in the NBA, really. And they won against Atlanta, sandwiched in the middle there, which also wasn't even a really good spot, but they somehow won the game, although only by 2 at home. So probably they were a favorite and didn't cover in that one, but I'm not even sure. Maybe not. Maybe that's not even true. I don't know. But regardless, I think Utah's going to be focused, and they're going to have the adjustments to make because they're coming off a loss to the same Minnesota team. They're going to want to step it up and play a better game this time, whereas Minnesota, like I said, they're playing a 6th straight road game now, which I believe was also the case with whoever I went against yesterday. Who did I go against yesterday? Brooklyn Nets. Yeah, they were playing a bunch of road games in a row, too. If you want to consider that San Antonio game in Austin to be a road game yesterday, which it's at least a semi-road game. This is a true road game for Minnesota, though. 6th straight game on the road, 2nd straight in the same venue, in elevation. After winning the first game easily, they just might not pay that much attention to Utah after beating them that easily in the previous game. And who do they have up next? Denver, the returning champions. That's a huge game against Denver. And then they got Cleveland, Golden State after that. So a few big opponents coming up. And the Denver game is tomorrow on NBA TV, whereas this game is not like a national TV game either. So I think all the aspects of this kind of make it a sandwich. not a very good rest spot or travel spot for Minnesota, having so much recent travel and this being their last of a long road trip here, and a team that they already beat in this venue already in the prior game. They just might not have total focus in this one. Jazz might, because they have the bounce back motivation here from losing to the same team on their own floor in the prior game. T-Wolves have bigger games coming up next, so that kind of makes it a sandwich. It's the look ahead plus the bad travel spot plus the zigzag at the very least. So Utah Jazz, you can get them at 7.5 right now. That's going to be the only play today. Plus 7.5 on Utah. Looks like the line's kind of just hanging around 7.5 right now. Utah does, according to pregame, have 85% of the tickets, but 97% of the cash. So I don't know about that. They appear to be the public team, but they do have the cash discrepancy. I'm not really sure where this is going to wind up. Like, I would not see how Utah would be the public team after people just saw them lose this same matchup by 19 points. And of course, the Minnesota T-Wolves, everybody knows how good they are, even though I think they are without Towns still. I don't even know. Are they still without Towns, actually? I don't even know. I mean, that's not going to really factor into the handicap here because it'll be factored into the line, and they've been without him for a long enough period of time now that it really doesn't really matter because like they're just used to playing without him at this point, and the line is just factoring it in and whatever. Minnesota, yeah, it looks like they've been without some of their other players as well, actually, though Anthony Edwards played last night, so I don't know. We'll see. It looks like Gobert is kind of the game time decision here. So I guess that's kind of the main thing here, where Towns is going to be out for who knows how long. Gobert did not play in that prior game. They still won without Gobert. So he has a rib sprain. So that was the first game that he missed. So kind of more injured player theory stuff going on. So the one added thing is if you probably don't have to like take this Utah Jazz play right now, the line might wind up going, well, I don't know, because it looks like the percentages are all kind of on the Jazz side as far as like the number of tickets. So maybe the line won't move up further, but if Gobert is coming back, you'd have to expect that might move the line up a little bit on Minnesota if he does come back. And if so, then I think you're just going to get more value in this spot on Utah. Cause I think with Gobert back, they might just get even more complacent thinking like, hey, we won this game easily already without him. And they have to like work him back into the lineup again. So I still like the Utah Jazz side, even if Gobert comes back. Just you might be able to get a better line if so, but I would say just watch the line and the market on this and try to get the best number that you can. But 7.5, not a terrible number to play on this one. So Utah Jazz plus those points. Peace, man. Happy March Madness Monday.